welcome to another episode of the Binge podcast. Today, let's look a little more closely at why humans tell stories in the first place. Why do humans tell stories, need stories? The aspect we're going to be looking at today is fiction as life simulation. In recent years, scientists have been writing books about the reasons why we tell each other stories. One theory posits that stories are like flight simulators. Neurobiologists have discovered that when a person is immersed in a story, their brain patterns are similar to what they would be if that person were actually performing the actions they're reading about or watching. So, if a recipient is emotionally engaged in a story, they are essentially living it, at least in terms of the brain patterns. The excitement is real, the fear, the empathy, the arousal. For more details on this kind of thing, read Brian Boyd on the Origin of Stories from 2009 or Gottschall, The Storytelling Animal from 2012. Anyway, stories are everywhere. We create and consume them from an early age. Homo sapiens have done so for millennia. Our modern media are a result of our ancient need for stories. We've been telling them to each other ever since we, as a species, have been human. It's what Homo sapiens do. It's a defining characteristic, what evolutionary biologists call an adaptation. That means that there is a reason for us to tell stories. They help us survive. And that's where the flight simulator comes in. Pilots sit in flight simulators for many, many hours, practicing and practicing until flying jumbo jets becomes second nature. Only when they don't have to consciously think about what they do, but have done it so often already that they do it automatically, are pilots allowed to actually fly a plane with real live passengers in it. Since our brain does stories we consume, we have done all sorts of things already, even though we have never done them in the flesh. We have been practicing from the first bedside story to the latest installment of our favorite series. And what have we been practicing? Conflicts of interest. Humans live in groups because there's more safety in numbers than as a solitary little homo, however sapient. When a group of Homo sapiens get together, three things can happen. Some of them become allies, some of them compete, and some of them mate. And that's essentially what happens in the group of characters in a story. The characters make friends or allies, they squabble or get into conflict over something they want, or they form a union or get together romantically. Competing over something as well as finding a mate involves problems. Keeping and maintaining an ally can too. There are potentially infinite problems involved with living in a group, and that's not even to consider all the potential threats and problems that come from outside the group. The idea that stories are like flight simulators suggests that fiction exists to allow us to practice problem solving in a safe environment. We can live through conflicts of interest without dire real-life consequences. That the stories may not be realistic is not really relevant, since the emotions we feel while consuming them are genuine, at least as far as our brain patterns are concerned. Thus, when we encounter real-life problems, we automatically do what we have learned in our life simulator, that is, story. Hence, stories are not merely entertainment. They have helped us survive as a species by helping us as individuals to deal with conflicts of interest within the social group. For stories to work as life simulators, they must be constructed within a certain very broad framework, which is to say they must feature conflicting interests, which boils down to characters solving their problems. Problems come from without and from within, They result in wants and needs, i.e. the want and need to overcome the problems. There's a whole host of things that typically go on in stories we like and care about, and we'll examine them in detail as this podcast goes on.